Warm greetings from the High 10. It is Everyday Shenanigans on this Sunday, June 1st, 2020. Thanks for joining me. It's a wonderful, wonderful day. Nice wind, sunny in the High 10. There's a lot going on in our country right now amid the death of George Floyd. And we have an uproar in our country right now. Protests, rallies in many cities across the United States. And people are rallying because they are tired of the miscarriage of justice, plural, against African American people in this country, dealing with civilians and the police departments here in America. And I want to bring you said information. It was uploaded last night on CNN. If you need verification for the storyline. Ex-prosecutor. Complaint against Minnesota cop in George Floyd case drops important clues. The criminal complaint charging former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter for the death of George Floyd offers key clues about the Hennepin County Attorney's Office approach to the enormously high-stakes prosecution that will unfold over the coming months. While the complaint sets forth a strong case, it also raises questions about the prosecutor's tactical approach and commitment to seeking a full measure of justice for Floyd's tragic death. A complaint is essentially a preliminary summary of evidence that prosecutors use to lodge a criminal charge and make an arrest. It is a crucial legal document, but it is not final or definitive. The complaint does not necessarily set forth everything that prosecutors know now or will learn as the investigation progresses. I've written and approved thousands of complaints as a prosecutor, and I've learned to pick up on the indicators, overt and subtle, contained within. Every word in a complaint matters, particularly here where the statement of probable cause runs less than 2 narrative pages, and where the prosecutors know full well the entire nation is watching. First, the lead charge itself, third-degree murder, is light given the facts. Third-degree murder carries a maximum penalty of 25 years and requires proof that the defendant committed an act imminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life. In other words, prosecutors must show that Chauvin acted recklessly and dangerously without necessarily intending to kill Floyd. But the prosecutors could have charged and still could eventually charge Chauvin with more serious second-degree murder, which carries a potential 40-year sentence and requires proof that the defendant intentionally killed the victim without premeditation. The evidence seems sufficient to support such a charge, particularly given the astonishing length of time that Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck. More on this below listed. But prosecutors sometimes tend to be conservative in initial charges. Keep an eye on whether they add the more serious second-degree charge as the case progresses. Overall, the complaint lays out a devastating case against Chauvin, though it adds little to the cell phone video of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. The most compelling part of the complaint is the timeline. It notes that Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes 46 seconds. Even more damning, the complaint notes that Chauvin kept his knee on Floyd's neck for 3 full minutes after Floyd stopped moving and nearly 2 minutes after he apparently ceased to breathe or speak. Another officer even checked Floyd's wrist for a pulse and said he couldn't find one, and yet Chauvin still did not immediately move. Those facts alone could establish the intentional conduct necessary for a second-degree murder charge. But the complaint also contains several warning signs that raise questions about the prosecutor's tactics and commitment to achieving full justice. The complaint fails to note that Floyd stated, "Don't kill me, and I'm about to die." The complaint notes that as Chauvin pressed his knee into Floyd's neck, Floyd stated, "I can't breathe, mama, and please." Yet the prosecutors inexplicably omit some of the most important lines Floyd uttered in the video. "Don't kill me, and I'm about to die." Floyd's statements are particularly crucial because they unequivocally put Chauvin on notice that Floyd was in mortal danger, yet Chauvin continued kneeling on his neck. Why would prosecutors leave out the clearest and most legally pivotal statements made by Floyd? The complaint notes that Floyd actively resisted being handcuffed. Prosecutors have an obligation to disclose evidence that is potentially helpful to the defendant, but the detail about Floyd actively resisting is irrelevant. What matters is not what Floyd did before he was handcuffed. What matters is what Chauvin did to Floyd after he was cuffed. Amen. Reared cuff, no less, and debilitated. The inclusion of this detail raises questions about the prosecutor's approach. Why include this? Are they trying to harm public perception of Floyd? Are they doing a subtle and gratuitous favor to Chauvin's defense? The complaint specifies that Floyd is over 6 feet tall and weighs more than 200 pounds. Again, the inclusion of this extraneous detail is curious. Why do the prosecutors go out of their way to specify Floyd's bodily measurements? What's the relevance? The implication seems to be that Floyd was a large man and hence was somehow scary or difficult to restrain. So what? He was unarmed, reared cuffs, sprawled out on the street, and outnumbered 4-1 by police officers. The complaint states that the autopsy revealed no physical findings that support a diagnosis of traumatic asphyxia or strangulation. This notation seems baffling at first glance, given the crystal clear video of Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck. But the lack of physical findings by no means rules out the possibility that the victim died of traumatic asphyxia, or strangulation. In other words, a person can die of asphyxiation with or without physical findings. The complaint is based on preliminary findings from the autopsy, so we await the full report, which should follow soon. The complaint notes that the combined effects of Mr. Floyd being restrained by the police, his underlying health conditions, and any potential intoxicants in his system likely contributed to his death. Restrained is a charitable way to describe what Chauvin did to Floyd on the video. Amen to that. Most would call that something closer to crushed or at least pinned down. And in my 14 years as a prosecutor or my 45 years of life, I've never heard of a potential intoxicant. Did Floyd have intoxicants in his system or not? A basic toxicology test should answer that question conclusively, and there is no excuse for prosecutors to not know the answer or to state it ambiguously 4 days after Floyd's death. In any event, even if intoxicants and health conditions somehow contributed to Floyd's death, it does not matter legally. So long as Chauvin's actions were even a contributory cause of Floyd's death, then Chauvin is legally responsible. If Floyd would be alive, if not for Chauvin's actions, then Chauvin can be convicted. This remains a strong case overall, particularly for the conservative third-degree murder charge that prosecutors have lodged. The video remains a devastating Exhibit A, and the complaint lays out a compelling timeline, but it's hard to ignore the prosecutor's inclusion of many relevant and ambiguous detours in the criminal complaint that could potentially detract from the charges brought against Chauvin. Now, your questions. Okay. And that is the said information. Just more information about the government under that. But anyway, let me say this. To me, it is murder of Mr. George Floyd by Mr. Chauvin. 8 minutes. Let me reiterate that. 8 minutes and 46 seconds he was on his neck with his knee to Mr. Floyd's neck. 3 minutes after Floyd stopped moving. Okay? He still had his knee to his neck for 3 minutes when the man obviously was not moving. 2 minutes, his knee remained on Mr. Floyd's neck when it was visible that Mr. Floyd was not speaking. Officer checked his pulse and could not find one, and Chauvin still did not remove his knee from his neck. So this third-degree murder charge brings at least 25 years to life. If they decide to ante up to second degree, it brings 40 years, can carry a sentence up to 40 years in prison. An 8-minute video, 10-minute video, whichsoever, it's all the same to me. Mr. Chauvin killed that man. Now, the defense attorneys will argue, well, it was in the line of duty. He was combative. There's the new video that is out now showing they had some type of struggle with Mr. Floyd in the car, but you do not see Floyd visibly in this said video. You just see them going around to the car, the officers, like they're trying to push him in or do something with him. I can't go on record and say because they're not showing anything. Some are saying the man said he couldn't breathe. He was claustrophobic. That's why he didn't want to be back in the back seat of a patrol car. Which and soever. The point is, you got him out of the car initially that he was in and was talking to him. Excuse me. You went across the street to another car. Perhaps he was combative because he didn't want to get inside that car. Perhaps he was under the influence of something. I don't know. Claustrophobic. I don't know. Once again, it does not matter. It does not matter. It is what you did, Mr. Chauvin, to Mr. Floyd thereafter. Because ask yourself this. If you removed him from car A, and it looks like you all were wrestling then, from car A, you take him across the street to car B. Now there's a video showing you all, officers, wrestling with him in the car, doing something to him. How did you go from car B now to the ground with your neck to his knee? You see, we know how the system is. Yes, this Minnesota prosecutor, they try to fluff it up because there's outrage and protest and vandalism and rallies and yah. But the fact still remains, you have an 8-minute video showing this man, almost 9 minutes, killing this man with his knee to the neck. The man cries out that he cannot breathe. He cannot breathe. You have bystanders saying the man can't breathe. You have bystanders watching you hold your knee to this man's neck, yet you still did not let up. You have another officer trying to block the view of the video taping of a young girl, which is complicit to murder. You also have another officer basically taunting Mr. Floyd to get up when he knew damn well the man could not get up with the officer's knee pressed against his neck. It does not matter if he was sick, had heart problems, whatever. Lightheaded, whatever the hell was going on with Mr. Floyd that day, it ain't got nothing to do with the fact that he was breathing when he went in that store to get a sandwich or whatever he was purchasing or trying to purchase. He was breathing when he sat behind the wheel of that car, and you snuffed that man out over a alleged fake $20 bill being passed at that grocery store. You willingly knew what you were doing, and there was intent, in my opinion. And I thank God that girl stood there and she filmed, because you all would have tried your best to let this one ride, that he had some type of ailment or he was under the influence, because right now we do not know what the toxicology report will reveal, but it doesn't matter, because thank God for the video. It shows you kept your knee on his neck. Because if we didn't have this video, you all would surely use that in your report. Oh, this was going on with him. He had this going on, or this was in his system, and that's why he died. And let's talk about the ambulance showing up. Hell, why'd y'all even call the ambulance? I found that baffling too. You call the ambulance, they drag his limp body, like somebody said, just dragged his body onto the gurney like he was trash. Like he was nobody. The medical officials tried to resuscitate Mr. Floyd for 1 hour at the hospital to no avail, because he was dead on that ground. And I think most of us know that. That's lucid and woke. This is a travesty to the American people in general, to the African American people, because you do not know the day when you will be a Mr. George Floyd, an Ahmaud Arbery, and so on and so forth. We will see what transpires with this case. I am praying for second-degree murder. Frankly, I would prefer first-degree, because I know that the defense attorney will try to use the fact that Chauvin is a law enforcement. He was doing his job on that fateful night, and Mr. Floyd was combative. And yah. But you see, the video that shows his knee to the neck shows everything, because you still can't explain how you go from point A to point B to another patrol car to then being on the ground with a knee to the neck for damn near 9 minutes. You mean to tell me you all couldn't control this man with a taser? You couldn't control him with your own hands to have him successfully handcuffed and put into the car without a broken arm, leg, neck? You get my point. Yes, I'm sure he was a big man. So he may not have been comfortable getting back there inside that car because those back seats are small. And if you're a big person, it would be uncomfortable, especially if your hands are behind you in handcuffs. I'm praying that the Minnesota prosecutor will do right by Mr. Floyd and his family and the community, because this is a miscarriage of justice. This is, to me, deliberate murder. Mr. Chauvin knew what he was doing on that fateful day, and he knew that he was cutting off the airway of Mr. Floyd. And there is no doubt about it. And I thank God for the video. I thank God for the young lady, the young girl who filmed that. Because I think this would have got pushed under the rug had it not been for the surveillance video on that phone. And we do know that the cops, the police department, were on board with pushing this under the rug. They were going by the statements of those police officers initially until the video went viral. And that's the most devastating part as well, besides the man's death, is that the police department signed off on this BS before having all the facts and information and surveillance footage of that fateful night. You're willing to ride or die for some people because they are police officers. Well, what a hell of a code to stand by. Kind of like the no snitch rule in the street. But now, several officers have been fired. So what I ask you, was it worth it that day to stand idly by and watch Mr. Chauvin murder Mr. George Floyd? And Mr. Chauvin, how do you feel now, knowing that you have murdered a man in cold blood? It was videoed, and you have caused an uproar in this country, which was long overdue. Whether you believe in violence or not, rallying or not, protesting or not, you got the ball crunk. And now there's people who have decided they're going to finish it. Because we have stood idly by for hundreds of years, allowing the white man to run over us and mistreat us, degrade us, and treat us as if we are trash and low-grade animals. And it will stop. Because we will no longer stand idly by and let you treat us any kind of way to only murder us in view of the public. Yes, this was a public lynching. Just a knee to the neck. Prayers to the Floyd family. Prayers to all Americans. Prayers for this country. This is once again another sad, unnecessary death over $20. And how terrible it must be for the person who called in on Mr. Floyd, the store clerk. You actually got to stand out there and watch George Floyd die by the hands of a police officer. You'd have to ask yourself, was it worth calling for a counterfeit bill? And there is no proof that Mr. Floyd even knew that the money was fraudulent. And in the end, just a $20 bill. This is a sick, sick story. Tragic, horrific, despicable, heinous crime exacted against an African-American man who was snuffed out in front of hundreds of people because you know it was viral. No words. This is Everyday Shenanigans. Thanks for joining me. Seeking justice for George Floyd. God bless America. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.